I still remember the morning I found out what happened at the church. It was Christmas Eve, 1933. I was 12 years old, and my father had promised we'd attend the early service at the Armenian church in Washington Heights. He worked nights at the docks, sometimes 16-hour shifts loading cargo ships that came in from Europe. Christmas morning was one of the few times he could take us anywhere as a family. He'd gotten the day off specially, talked to his foreman weeks in advance to make sure he wouldn't be called in. We woke up before dawn. I remember lying in bed, hearing my parents move around in the kitchen, the smell of coffee starting to fill our small apartment. The streets outside were empty, just that particular kind of quiet you only get on holiday mornings in the city. No vendors calling out, no traffic, just the occasional sound of footsteps on the sidewalk below our window. My mother had pressed my good shirt the night before, and I remember the starch still felt stiff against my collar as I buttoned it up. My fingers were clumsy with cold. Our radiator never worked properly, and in December, our apartment was always freezing until mid-morning. I could see my breath when I stood near the window. We walked the 6 blocks to the Church of the Holy Cross. My father walked fast, like he always did, and my mother and I had to hurry to keep up. He was wearing his wool coat, the good one he only wore to church and funerals. His shoes were shined. I remember noticing that because he never shined his shoes. My mother must have done it while he was sleeping. My father was excited. He kept talking about Archbishop Turian, how important it was that we'd be there to see him lead the service. He explained that the Archbishop was the head of all the Armenian churches in America, that having him at our church was an honor. I didn't understand why it mattered so much. To me, church was just church. Long, boring, full of incense and old people speaking a language I only half understood. But my father had this look on his face I'd never seen before. Pride, maybe, or hope. Like something important was finally happening to our family. We arrived early, maybe 30 minutes before the service was supposed to start. The church was already filling up. Hundreds of people, all dressed in their best clothes, speaking Armenian in low, reverent voices. Women in dark dresses with their hair covered, men in suits that looked like they'd been saved for special occasions. Children fidgeting in the pews, their parents shushing them constantly. My mother found us seats near the middle, maybe 15 rows back from the altar. The church was bigger than I remembered from the few times we'd been before. High ceilings with paintings of saints I didn't recognize. Candles everywhere, their flames reflecting off the gold decorations around the altar. The air was thick with incense and the smell of old wood and candle wax. I sat between my parents, watching people file in. The pews kept filling. People were standing in the back. I'd never seen the church this crowded. My father kept turning around, nodding at people he recognized. My mother adjusted her scarf and checked to make sure my shirt was tucked in properly. The service started on time. I remember the altar boys processing down the aisle first, carrying candles and banners. Then the deacons in their robes. The organ was playing something I didn't recognize. Not a Christmas carol, something older and more complicated. People stood. My father pulled me up by my shoulder, his hand heavy and warm. Then Archbishop Turian appeared at the back of the church. Everyone turned to look. The organ got louder. He was wearing white and gold vestments that caught the candlelight, carrying some kind of ceremonial staff with a cross on top. He was older than I expected, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and thick glasses that reflected the light. He walked slowly, deliberately, blessing people as he passed. His hand would rise and make the sign of the cross, and people would bow their heads. Some reached out to touch his robes as he went by. The congregation seemed to lean forward slightly, everyone trying to see him better. My mother was crying, just tears running down her face. She wasn't sobbing or making noise, just crying silently. I looked up at my father and saw his jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the Archbishop. Archbishop Turian made it about halfway down the aisle, maybe 7 or 8 rows ahead of us. I didn't see it happen at first. There was just suddenly movement near him, too fast and too close. Bodies pressing in from the sides. The processional stopped. I heard my mother make a sound, not a scream, just this sharp intake of breath. My father's hand clamped down on my shoulder so hard it hurt. Someone was shouting, not words I understood, just noise. Angry noise. Then more shouting, multiple voices overlapping. The organ stopped mid-phrase, the sound cutting off so abruptly it left this awful silence underneath the yelling. People around us were standing, pushing forward or pulling back, blocking my view. I tried to look between them, but my father pushed my head down. "Don't look," he said. His voice sounded strange, tight, and higher than normal. But I looked anyway. Not directly, just enough to see between the people in front of us, through the gap between a woman's shoulder and the man next to her. The Archbishop was on the ground. There were men around him. I counted 4, maybe 5. They were kneeling over him, but their arms were moving in this weird, jerking way, up and down, mechanical and purposeful. It took me too long to understand what I was seeing. My brain wouldn't process it. They looked like they were digging or hammering something, but there was nothing on the floor except the Archbishop's white and gold vestments. One of the men stood up. His hand was dark, not like he was wearing a glove, dark with something wet that reflected the candlelight. The front of his coat was dark too, spreading across his chest. He was looking around at everyone like he couldn't understand why we were all there, why we were staring at him. His mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. That's when I saw the knife. It wasn't big. Just a regular kitchen knife, the kind my mother used to cut meat for dinner. The blade was maybe 6 inches long, but it was red all the way up to the handle, and something was dripping off the tip onto the floor. The man dropped it. It clattered on the marble, and that sound, that tiny metallic sound, was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It echoed in the silence that had fallen over everyone. People started screaming then, not everyone at once. It came in waves. Someone behind us was praying in Armenian, the words coming so fast they blurred together. A woman near the front fainted. I watched her just fold into herself and disappear into the crowd around her. Children were crying. Men were shouting. Some people were trying to get to the Archbishop, others were trying to run. The men who'd done it, some of them were just standing there. One was sitting in a pew like he'd gotten tired. Another was walking toward the door, but slowly, not running, like he had nowhere to go. My father picked me up. I was too old to be carried. I was 12, almost as tall as my mother, but he did it anyway, turning my face into his shoulder and pushing through the people trying to get out. My mother was ahead of us, her hand white-knuckled on the back of each pew she passed, pulling herself forward. People were pushing, shoving. Someone stepped on my foot and my shoe came off. My father didn't stop to get it. We made it outside. The cold air hit my face and I could breathe again. My father put me down on the sidewalk but kept his hand on my head, pressing it against his side so I couldn't turn around and look back at the church. My mother was doubled over, her hands on her knees, breathing hard. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was white. Police were already coming. I could hear the whistles getting closer. My father just stood there, staring at the church doors where people were still pouring out. Some were bloody. I don't know if it was their blood or the Archbishop's. "They killed him," someone said behind us. A man's voice shaking. They killed the Archbishop in the church on Christmas Eve. I didn't understand how it was possible. We were in church. It was Christmas Eve morning. There were hundreds of people there, families with children, old women who could barely walk. How could someone just walk up to the Archbishop and stab him? Who would do that? Who would plan that? We walked home. Nobody spoke. My father kept his hand on my shoulder the whole way. My mother walked a few steps ahead, her arms wrapped around herself. The streets were still quiet, but it felt different now. Wrong. Like the city itself knew what had happened. When we got back to our apartment, my father turned on the radio immediately. Nothing yet. Too early. He sat at the kitchen table and didn't move, just stared at the radio like he could make it tell him something. My mother sent me to my room. I could hear them talking through the wall. My mother's voice was high and breaking. My father's was low, almost monotone. I pressed my ear against the plaster and listened. "They planned it," my father was saying. "They brought knives from home. They knew he'd be there. They knew exactly when he'd be walking down the aisle. But why? My mother asked. Why would they do that? On Christmas Eve, politics, the flag, the arguments about the homeland. It doesn't matter why, they did it. I didn't understand what he meant about a flag. I learned later there had been some argument about the Archbishop and the Soviet flag, something political I still don't fully understand. But it was enough. Enough to make 9 men bring knives to church on Christmas Eve and murder him in front of everyone. They caught all of them within hours. Some tried to run. Some just sat there in the church afterward like they couldn't believe what they'd done. One of them was beaten by people from the congregation before the police got there. I heard he lost an eye. 2 got convicted of murder. The rest got manslaughter. They all went to prison. But that didn't fix anything. My father stopped going to church after that. Not just the Armenian church, all churches. He'd stand by the window sometimes on Sunday mornings and watch people walk past in their good clothes, and his face would do this thing I can't describe, like something inside him had broken and healed wrong. My mother went back eventually, but to a different church across town. She never talked about what happened. None of the adults did, not really. It was like they'd all agreed to pretend it hadn't happened the way it did. But I remember the sound of the knife hitting the floor. I remember the dark red spreading across the man's coat. I remember how quiet everyone got right before the screaming started, like the whole church held its breath at once. And I remember the Archbishop's face as he was walking down the aisle right before it happened. He was smiling. Not a big smile, just peaceful. Content. Like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He had no idea. I'm 83 now. The men who killed him are long dead. The people who were there that day are almost all gone. But the church is still there, still standing on the same street in Washington Heights. I've never been back. Sometimes, on Christmas Eve, I think about going just to see if it feels different now, if enough time has passed. But I never do. Because I know what I'd see when I walked through those doors. I'd see exactly where it happened. I'd see the spot on the floor where he fell. I'd count the rows from where we were sitting to where he died. I'd see the pews where people sat and watched and did nothing because what could they do? And I think I'd still see that man standing there with the knife in his hand, looking around at all of us like he couldn't understand what he'd just done. Like he'd expected something different to happen. Like he thought God was going to stop him. I worked as a clerk at Brentano's bookstore for 43 years. Started in 1908 when I was 16, retired in 1951. In all that time, I never forgot the last customer I served on December 12, 1910. Her name was Dorothy Arnold. I didn't know that when she came in, she was just another wealthy young woman browsing the humor section, the kind we saw every day. Brentano's was on 5th Avenue and 27th Street back then, right in the heart of where the society families liked to shop. We got a lot of them daughters of bankers and industrialists coming in to buy books while their mothers shopped for dresses down the street. It was a Monday, cold but clear. I remember because I'd walked to work that morning and my fingers were still numb when I got there, even with gloves on. The store was quieter than usual. December was typically busy, people buying gifts, but that particular Monday was slow. Maybe people were waiting until closer to Christmas. She came in around 1:30 in the afternoon. I noticed her because she was alone and most of the young society women came in pairs or with chaperones. She was wearing a dark blue suit with a long coat and a hat with a wide brim that shadowed her face. She carried herself like someone used to having money, not arrogant exactly, just comfortable. Like she'd never had to worry about the price of anything. She went straight to the humor section. We kept it in the back, past the new releases and the literature. I was reorganizing the philosophy section nearby, and I watched her pull out books, flip through them, put them back. She seemed like she was looking for something specific. After maybe 10 minutes, she brought a book to the counter. An Engaged Girl's Sketches by Emily Calvin Blake. It was new, just published that year. Light reading. The kind of book young women bought to share with friends. The kind that wasn't serious literature but wasn't trashy either. I rang it up. 35 cents. She paid with exact change from a small purse, which I remember thinking was unusual. Most of our wealthy customers paid with bills and didn't care about the change. "Would you like it wrapped?" I asked. "No, thank you. I'll just carry it." Her voice was soft, educated. She had an accent that suggested private tutors rather than public school. She smiled when she took the book, a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, and then she left. That was it. 30 seconds maybe, a completely ordinary transaction. I didn't think about her again until 6 weeks later. It was late January, and one of my coworkers brought in a newspaper during his lunch break. He was reading it in the back room where we took our breaks, and I heard him say, "Hey, didn't we sell a book to this girl?" He showed me the front page. There was a photograph of a young woman, and the headline said something about a missing heiress. The article said her name was Dorothy Arnold, that she was 25 years old, the daughter of Francis Arnold, who'd made his fortune in perfume imports. She'd been missing since December 12th. I looked at the photograph. It took me a moment to be sure. The picture was formal, probably taken at some society event, and she was dressed differently than when I'd seen her. But it was her. Same face, same serious expression. The article said she'd left her family's home on East 79th Street that morning to buy an evening gown for her sister's debutante ball. She'd been seen at Park in Tilford buying chocolates. Then she'd been seen at Brentano's buying a book. A friend had run into her outside the bookstore around 2 p.m., and Dorothy had mentioned she was going to walk through Central Park. No one had seen her after that. I told my manager I'd served her. He contacted the police immediately. 2 detectives came to the store that afternoon. They asked me to describe everything I could remember about the transaction, what she'd bought, how she'd seemed, whether she'd said anything unusual. I told them what I've told you. She bought a humor book. She paid with exact change. She seemed fine, not upset, not nervous, just normal. She'd left through the front door. They asked if she'd mentioned meeting anyone, if anyone had been with her, if I'd seen anyone watching her. No. They asked if I was certain it was her. I said I was. The detectives looked at each other in this way that made me uncomfortable, like they didn't quite believe me or like they wished I'd said something more useful. One of them asked, "Did she seem like someone who was planning to run away?" I didn't know how to answer that. How would someone look if they were planning to disappear? I'd sold books to hundreds of young women. Some seemed happy, some seemed bored, some seemed distracted. Dorothy Arnold had seemed normal. After the detectives left, my manager told me not to talk to any reporters. He said Brentano's didn't want to be associated with the scandal. I asked what scandal, and he just shook his head and went back to his office. But reporters came anyway. They stood outside the store asking everyone who went in or out if they'd seen Dorothy Arnold. One of them cornered me on my way home and offered me $5 to tell him what she'd bought. I didn't take the money. I didn't tell him anything. The newspapers went crazy with the story. Every day, there was something new. The police had searched Central Park. They'd dragged the lakes. They'd searched the reservoirs. Nothing. They'd interviewed her friends, her family, everyone who'd seen her that day. No one knew anything. Then it came out that her family hadn't reported her missing right away. They'd waited 6 weeks. They'd hired private investigators first, trying to keep it quiet. They were afraid of scandal. That detail bothered me more than anything else. 6 weeks. If something had happened to her, if someone had taken her or hurt her, 6 weeks was a long time. The trail would be cold. Evidence would be gone. More details started appearing in the papers. Dorothy Arnold had wanted to be a writer. She'd been sending stories to magazines under a fake name. She'd received rejection letters from McClure's magazine. She'd been seeing an older man her family didn't approve of, someone named George Griscom Jr., who'd gone to Italy right before she disappeared. The papers suggested they'd been romantically involved. People started theorizing. Some said she'd run away to Europe to be with Griscom. Others said she'd killed herself in Central Park and the body hadn't been found. Some said she'd run away to New York to live independently, that she was somewhere in the city under a different name. A few said she'd died during a botched abortion. There was some evidence she'd pawned jewelry, and people suggested she used the money to pay a doctor. The theories kept coming for months, years even. Every time an unidentified body turned up somewhere, people wondered if it was Dorothy Arnold. Every time a young woman was spotted in Europe or California or anywhere, someone would report it might be her. But nothing was ever confirmed. I kept thinking about that transaction. I'd see it in my mind sometimes while I was working, her pulling the book off the shelf, carrying it to the counter, handing me the exact change. I'd replay it looking for something I'd missed, some sign, some indication that she was about to vanish. But there was nothing. She'd been buying a book, that was all. The worst part was reading about her family. Her mother apparently had a breakdown. Her father spent a fortune hiring investigators, offering rewards, following up every lead, no matter how unlikely. Her sister, the one who was supposed to have the debutante ball, canceled it. The whole family just fell apart. And I kept thinking I was one of the last people to see her. I'd spoken to her. I'd handed her the book she'd wanted. And then she'd walked out the door and disappeared. A man came to the store maybe a year after she vanished. He didn't identify himself, but I assumed he was another investigator. He asked me the same questions the police had asked, but more detailed. What was her mood? What was her expression? Did her hand shake when she paid? Did she look behind her when she left? I gave him the same answers. She'd seemed fine, normal, nothing unusual. He asked me, "Do you think she knew?" "Knew what?" I said. "That she was going to disappear." I thought about it. I thought about the way she paid with exact change, like she'd counted it out beforehand. I thought about how she declined to have the book wrapped, like she didn't want to wait the extra 30 seconds. I thought about how she'd left alone, without mentioning meeting anyone. "I don't know," I said. The man nodded. He looked tired. No one does. He left, and I never saw him again. I worked at Brentano's for another 40 years. I served thousands of customers. I forgot most of them immediately after they left, but I never forgot Dorothy Arnold. Sometimes I'd see a young woman browsing the humor section, and for just a second I'd think it was her, that she'd come back, that whatever had happened on December 12th, 1910 had somehow reversed itself, and she'd walked back in to buy another book. But it was never her. I'm 91 now. Dorothy Arnold would be 139 if she were still alive, which of course she's not. She's been dead for decades one way or another, but her case is still open, still unsolved. The oldest missing person case in New York City. I've read every theory, I followed every lead that made the papers, and I still don't know what happened to her. But I know this. When she left Brentano's that afternoon, she walked south on 5th Avenue. Her friend saw her near 27th Street, and they talked for a few minutes. Dorothy said she was going to walk through Central Park. It was about 2 p.m. The park was busy, Monday afternoon, decent weather, plenty of people around. Somewhere between 27th Street and the park, Dorothy Arnold ceased to exist. She didn't scream. No one heard a struggle. No witnesses came forward saying they'd seen anyone force her into a car or drag her into an alley. She was just there, walking on 5th Avenue in broad daylight, carrying a humor book and a bag of chocolates, and then she wasn't. You can't vanish like that. Not really. Not without someone seeing something. Not without leaving some trace. A body, a clue, something. But she did. I think about it sometimes when I can't sleep. I'm old now, and sleep doesn't come easy. I lie there in the dark, and I see her walking out of the bookstore. I see her turn south on 5th Avenue. I see her walking away, and I wonder, when did she know? Was it when she bought the book? When she said goodbye to her friend? When she reached whatever corner or doorway or moment where everything changed? Or did she never know at all? Did she just keep walking, thinking about her sister's ball and the book in her hand and what she'd have for dinner that night, right up until the second she disappeared? I don't know which possibility is worse. The case is still open. After 11 years, it's still open. The police file is still there somewhere in an archive labeled Dorothy Arnold, missing December 12, 1910. And somewhere in that file is my statement, the clerk from Brentano's who sold her a book. One of the last people to see her before she walked out into the world and never came back. I was a rookie patrol officer in Dumont, New Jersey in December of 1977. 23 years old, 6 months out of the academy, still learning the routes and the people and how things worked in a small Bergen County town. December 29th was a Thursday. I was working the day shift, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It was cold that week, the kind of cold that makes your face hurt when you step outside. There'd been snow a few days before Christmas, maybe 3 or 4 inches, and it was still piled up along the sides of the roads, gray and crusty. The call came in around 9:30 in the morning. Suspicious package in Memorial Field Park. That was all dispatch said. I was closest, so I took it. Memorial Field Park was small, maybe 2 acres, with a playground on one end and some baseball fields that were empty in winter. There were trees along the edges, bare branches covered in frost. A few dog walkers used it in the mornings, and kids played there after school, but on a Thursday morning in late December, it should have been empty. I pulled into the parking lot and saw a woman standing near the entrance holding a leash. Her dog was a few feet away, barking at something under one of the trees. She waved when she saw my patrol car. I got out and walked over. My boots crunched on the frozen ground. "Officer, I think there's something wrong," she said. Her face was red from the cold, and her breath came out in clouds. "My dog found something and I looked at it, and I don't think it's right." "What kind of something?" I asked. She pointed toward a cluster of trees maybe 30 yards away. "Under there." "It's wrapped like presents, Christmas presents, but they're just sitting there in the snow, and I touched one, and it's heavy and it doesn't feel right." I told her to wait by her car and walked toward the trees. The dog kept barking behind me. She was right. There were packages under the trees, 2 of them rectangular boxes wrapped in Christmas paper. One had Santa Clauses on it. The other had candy canes. The paper was wet from the snow, starting to tear in places. They were sitting on the ground, partially hidden by the low-hanging branches. I crouched down next to them. They were big, the kind of boxes a large toy might come in, maybe 2 feet long, 1.5 feet wide. The wrapping wasn't neat. It was sloppy, with too much tape, the edges folded unevenly, like someone had wrapped them in a hurry. There was a smell, faint but there, sweet and wrong at the same time. I didn't touch them immediately. Something about the scene felt off. Christmas had been 4 days ago. If someone had left presents here by accident, they would have come back for them. And who wraps presents and then leaves them in a park? I stood up and radioed dispatch. Told them I needed a supervisor and maybe a detective. The dispatcher asked why, and I said I wasn't sure yet, but something wasn't right. While I waited, I walked around the packages. There was a third one. Smaller, maybe the size of a shoebox, about 10 feet away from the others. Same Christmas paper. Same sloppy wrapping. It was partially buried in the snow, like someone had tried to kick snow over it. My supervisor arrived maybe 15 minutes later. Sergeant Kowalski, a guy who'd been on the force for 20 years and had seen everything. He walked over, looked at the packages, and his face changed. "Don't touch them," he said. "I wasn't planning to," I said. He radioed for detectives and crime scene. Then he told me to tape off the area and keep everyone back. The woman with the dog was still waiting by the parking lot, and a couple of other people had stopped to see what was happening. I strung crime scene tape between the trees and told everyone to leave. The detectives showed up around 10:30. There were 3 of them, and they spent a long time just looking at the packages before anyone touched them. They took photographs from every angle. They measured the distance between each package. They examined the wrapping paper. Then one of them put on gloves and carefully cut the tape on the largest package. I was standing maybe 20 feet away, but I saw his face change. He stepped back quickly and turned away. One of the other detectives moved forward and looked inside the box. He radioed for the medical examiner immediately. Sergeant Kowalski told me to move the perimeter back, get everyone farther away. I asked what was in the boxes, and he just shook his head. I found out later, everyone found out later. It was in the newspapers for weeks. The boxes contained body parts, human body parts, a torso in one box, a hand in another. The small box had internal organs. The torso had been dismembered carefully, precisely. The medical examiner said later it looked almost surgical. The neck had been cut cleanly, so had the shoulders and hips. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. The boxes also contained plastic bags. The body parts were wrapped in plastic inside the Christmas paper. And there was another detail that didn't make the newspapers right away. The genitals had been removed. Excised, the ME said, cut out completely. They weren't in any of the packages. We searched the entire park that day. Officers walked grid patterns through the snow, looking for more packages or any other evidence. We found one more piece about 100 yards away, near Hamilton Avenue. Wrapped in plastic, but not in a box. The medical examiner worked on identifying the victim for days. Without a head or hands, it was difficult. But they managed to get fingerprints from the hand in the second box, and they ran them through the system. The victim's name was Gaylor Alexander. She was 17 years old. She had a record prostitution arrests in New York City. She lived on Staten Island with her mother and younger sister. She'd been reported missing on December 20th. 9 days before we found her in Memorial Field Park, the detectives started investigating. They found out she'd been working in Manhattan, around Times Square. She'd been seen there on December 19th. After that, nothing. No one had seen her leave with anyone. No one had seen anything suspicious. The case went on for weeks. They searched dumpsters and vacant lots all over Bergen County and New York, looking for the rest of her body. They interviewed her friends, her family, people who'd seen her working. They developed theories about who might have killed her and why, but they never found her head. They never found her hands. Just the one hand in the package, the rest were missing. They never found the genitals. And they never found who did it. I kept thinking about those packages. Someone had wrapped them in Christmas paper. They'd used Santa Clauses and candy canes like they were making a joke, like they were mocking what Christmas was supposed to be about. Someone had cut up a 17-year-old girl, put the pieces in boxes, wrapped them like presents, and left them under a tree in a public park where anyone might find them. A child could have found them. 2 weeks after we found the packages in Dumont, more remains turned up in Manhattan, a severed head and a hand in 2 subway lockers at Port Authority, 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. The lockers were checked routinely every week, and the attendant found them during his January 16th inspection. The head and hand were identified as belonging to Gaylor Alexander. So whoever killed her had kept some parts in New Jersey and some in New York. They'd crossed state lines. They'd divided the body deliberately, maybe to make identification harder, or maybe just because they wanted to. The case got transferred mostly to New York after that. The NYPD took over the investigation. Bergen County stayed involved, but it became a New York case. I followed it in the newspapers for months. Every few weeks, there'd be a new article saying the police had a lead or were questioning someone, but nothing ever came of it. No arrests, no suspects publicly named, just a 17-year-old girl who'd been murdered and dismembered and left in Christmas packages, and nobody knew who did it or why. I think about her sometimes, not as much anymore. It's been almost 50 years, but I still think about her. I wonder what happened in those 9 days between when she disappeared and when we found her. I wonder if she knew the person who killed her. I wonder if it was fast or if she suffered. Mostly I think about the Christmas wrapping. That detail bothered me more than anything else. The care someone took to wrap the boxes. They could have just left the plastic bags. They could have dumped the body parts anywhere, but they wrapped them. They chose festive paper with Santa Clauses and candy canes. They taped them up and left them under a tree like they were presents waiting to be opened. What kind of person does that? I left Dumont PD in 1982, moved to a different department, eventually made detective myself. I worked homicides for 15 years. I saw a lot of bodies, a lot of crime scenes, a lot of ways people can hurt each other. But I never saw anything like those Christmas packages. The case is still open, officially unsolved. Every few years, someone claims to have new information or a new theory, and the detectives look into it, but nothing ever pans out. Gaylor Alexander's murder remains one of the unsolved cases in the NYPD files. Her mother died in the 90s. I read about it in an obituary. The article mentioned that she never stopped looking for answers about her daughter's death. She called the police regularly for years, asking if there were any updates. There never were. I'm 70 now, retired for almost 20 years. I live in Florida now, far from New Jersey winters and Memorial Field Park, but I still remember that morning clearly. The cold, the dog barking, the woman's face when she said something didn't feel right. She was right, it wasn't right. I remember walking up to those packages under the trees and thinking they looked wrong there, out of place. Christmas was over. Presents should be inside under trees in living rooms, opened and enjoyed, not outside in the snow in a public park. And I remember the smell, that sweet, wrong smell that I couldn't identify at first but understood later. Sometimes I wonder if the killer went back to watch, if they parked somewhere nearby and waited to see who would find the packages, if they watched the police arrive and tape off the area and carefully open the boxes, if they got some kind of satisfaction from it, or if they just walked away and never thought about it again. If Gaylor Alexander was just another girl to them, another body to dismember and discard. I don't know which possibility is worse. What I do know is this: somewhere out there, someone wrapped a teenage girl's body parts in Christmas paper. They cut the tape, folded the edges, made it look like presents. They carried those boxes to a park and left them under a tree, and then they walked away. They're probably still out there, probably old now if they're still alive. Maybe they've killed other people. Maybe Gaylor Alexander was their only victim. Maybe they think about it sometimes, or maybe they've forgotten entirely. But those boxes are still in the evidence room somewhere. The Christmas paper is still wrapped around them. The Santa Clauses and candy canes are still there, faded now, marked with evidence tags and catalog numbers. And somewhere in the files is my report from December 29, 1977. The rookie patrol officer who responded to a call about suspicious packages in Memorial Field Park. I wish I'd never gotten that call. I wish someone else had been closer. I wish that woman's dog had never found them. But wishes don't change anything. The packages were there, someone put them there, and Gaylor Alexander is still dead, and we still don't know who killed her. I was a maid in the Houseman household for 3 months before the Christmas murders. It wasn't a long time, but it was long enough to know the house, long enough to know the people, long enough to know something was wrong with Polly Bodine. This was 1843, and I was 17 years old. I'd come to Staten Island from Ireland the year before, and work was scarce. When Mrs. Houseman hired me to help with the cleaning and the baby, I was grateful. The pay was modest but steady, and the Housemans seemed like decent people. The house was in Granite Village, a small cluster of homes near the shore, not wealthy, but respectable. Mr. Houseman worked as a foreman at a quarry. His wife Emmeline was 24, pretty in a quiet way, with dark hair she wore in a bun. They had a daughter, Annalisa, who was almost 2 years old, a sweet child, always smiling, always reaching for her mother. Polly Bodine lived across the street. Yeah, she was Emmeline's sister-in-law, married to Emmeline's brother George, though they were separated. Polly had a reputation. Everyone in Granite Village knew about her. She'd left her husband, was living alone, had taken up with the pharmacist from town. People said she drank. People said worse things too, things I won't repeat. But Emmeline was kind to her. They visited each other regularly. Emmeline would send me across the street with food sometimes, or to bring Polly over for tea. Polly would come, usually in the afternoon, and the two women would sit in the parlor while I watched Annalisa. I didn't like being in the room with Polly. There was something about her that made me uncomfortable. The way she looked at things, at the silver candlesticks on the mantel, at Emmeline's jewelry, at the household items, like she was assessing their value. And the way she looked at Emmeline sometimes when Emmeline wasn't watching, it wasn't a friendly look. In early December, I noticed Polly was pregnant. Her stomach was starting to show, though she tried to hide it with loose dresses. Emily noticed too. I heard them talking about it one afternoon when I was in the next room. "What will you do?" Emmeline asked. "I don't know yet," Polly said. Her voice sounded tired. "George won't help. His family has made that clear. And Mr. Lovett?" That was the pharmacist. Polly didn't answer right away. Then she said, "He has a wife. He won't leave her." There was a long silence. Then Emmeline said, "You can stay with us if you need to, until you figure things out." I remember thinking that was a mistake. I didn't know why exactly, just a feeling in my chest that said letting Polly stay in the house would be wrong. But it was Christmas time, and Emmeline was a Christian woman who believed in charity. She wouldn't turn away family, even family like Polly. Christmas Day was quiet. I had the day off and spent it with other Irish servants in town. When I came back to work on the 26th, everything seemed normal. Emmeline was tired. The baby had been fussy during the night, but otherwise fine. Mr. Houseman had gone back to work at the quarry. I spent the day helping Emmeline with the washing and the cooking. The next day, December 27th, was my last day in that house. I arrived in the morning as usual. Emmeline was in the kitchen with Aunt Eliza. The baby was eating bread with jam, getting it all over her face and hands. Emmeline was laughing, wiping the jam away. I remember that laugh. It was the last time I heard it. Mr. Houseman left for work around 7. I started the fires in the fireplaces. It was cold that week, below freezing most days. Emmeline mentioned that Polly might come by later. She didn't say why, just that Polly had sent word she wanted to talk. Around mid-morning, there was a knock at the door. I answered it. Polly was there, wearing a heavy coat and a scarf wrapped around her face against the cold. She asked if Emmeline was home. I let her in. She went into the parlor with Emmeline, and I took Aunt Eliza upstairs to change her clothes. The baby was getting heavy, almost 2 years old, starting to walk and talk. She babbled while I changed her, saying mama and baby and other words that weren't quite words yet. I heard voices downstairs. "Ow!" Not loud, but intense. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was tense. After maybe 20 minutes, Polly left. I heard the front door close. When I came downstairs with Aunt Eliza, Emmeline was standing by the window, looking out toward Polly's house across the street. Her face was pale. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" I asked. She turned and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine, Mary," but it wasn't fine. I could feel it. The air in the house felt different, heavy. The afternoon passed slowly. Emmeline was distracted, kept looking out the window. Aunt Eliza was cranky, didn't want a nap. I tried to keep busy with the housework, but I kept glancing at Emmeline, worried. Around 4 o'clock, Mr. Houseman came home early from work. That was unusual. He said he hadn't been feeling well, thought he might have caught a cold. He went upstairs to rest. I left at 5, like I always did. It was already getting dark, the way it does in late December. Emmeline was in the kitchen starting dinner. Aunt Eliza was playing on the floor with wooden blocks. Mr. Houseman was still upstairs. "I'll see you tomorrow, ma'am," I said. Emmeline looked up from the stove. "Thank you, Mary. Have a good evening." That was the last time I saw her alive. The next morning, I was walking to work when I saw smoke. Thick, black smoke rising from the direction of Granite Village. I started running. By the time I got there, half the neighborhood was already gathered outside the Houseman house. Flames were coming from the upstairs windows. Men with buckets were throwing water, but it wasn't enough. The fire was too strong. I pushed through the crowd, trying to see, trying to understand what was happening. Someone grabbed my arm, Mrs. Patterson, a neighbor I knew. Her face was white, streaked with tears. "Don't look," she said. "Don't go any closer." "Where's Mrs. Houseman?" I asked. "Where's the baby?" Mrs. Patterson just shook her head. They got the fire out eventually. It took an hour, maybe more. When it was done, when the smoke had cleared enough to see inside, the men went in. They came out carrying blankets. I couldn't see what was underneath, but I didn't need to. Later, I heard the details. Everyone heard the details. It was all anyone talked about for weeks. Emmeline and Annalisa had been found in the upstairs bedroom. Their skulls had been crushed, their throats had been cut. The bodies had been mutilated, broken bones, wounds that had nothing to do with the fire. And then someone had tried to burn the house down, probably to hide what they'd done. Mr. Houseman wasn't there. He'd left the house sometime during the night and hadn't come back. When the police found him the next day, he couldn't explain where he'd been. Said he'd gone for a walk and lost track of time. But his clothes were clean, no blood on them, no soot from the fire. The police arrested Polly Bodine within days. Neighbors had seen her near the house that night. Someone said they'd seen her leaving around 10 p.m. Another person said they'd seen her on the ferry the next morning, drinking gin and acting strange. And then there was the silver. Emmeline's silver candlesticks were missing from the house. 2 days after the murders, Polly tried to pawn silver candlesticks at a shop in town. They had Emmeline's initials engraved on the bottom. The trial was unlike anything Staten Island had ever seen. Newspapers from all over the country covered it. Artists drew pictures of Polly in the courtroom. People wrote songs about the murders. P.T. Barnum even created a wax figure showing Polly killing Emmeline and put it in his museum in Manhattan. The first trial ended with a hung jury, couldn't agree on a verdict. The second trial found her guilty, but the verdict was overturned on appeal. The third trial, held upstate because they couldn't find impartial jurors in New York, found her not guilty. She walked free in 1846. I saw her once after that, maybe 10 years later. I was in town buying groceries, and she passed me on the street. She was older, heavier, her hair gone gray. She didn't recognize me, but I recognized her. She looked tired, worn down, like something inside her had broken and never healed right. She lived the rest of her life on Staten Island, mostly alone. People avoided her. Children crossed the street when they saw her coming. She died in 1892 at age 82 and was buried in Fairview Cemetery, not far from where Emmeline and Annalisa are buried. I'm an old woman now. I never married, never had children of my own. I worked as a maid for other families in Staten Island for 40 more years, and then I retired. But I never forgot that Christmas week in 1843. I think about it sometimes. About Polly standing in the parlor that morning talking to Emmeline, about whatever they said to each other, about Polly leaving and Emmeline standing at the window watching her go. Did Emmeline know? Did she suspect what was going to happen? Or was she just worried about her sister-in-law, trying to figure out how to help someone who couldn't be helped? I think about Annalisa too, about the jam on her face that morning and the way she said mama in that babbling voice. About how she was playing with blocks the last time I saw her, completely innocent, completely unaware that she only had hours left. She was 20 months old. She never got to grow up, never got to have a life. Someone took that from her on a winter night 3 days after Christmas. The police never found the murder weapon, never found all of Emmeline's stolen silver, never found definitive proof of who killed them, though everyone had their theories. Polly always maintained her innocence. Right up until she died, she insisted she hadn't done it. Maybe she didn't. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was Mr. Houseman or someone we never suspected. But I remember the way Polly looked at things in that house, the way she assessed value, the way she looked at Emmeline when Emmeline wasn't watching. And I remember something else. The morning of December 27th, when Polly came to the door, she was wearing a heavy coat and a scarf wrapped around her face. It was cold, yes, but I remember thinking it was strange how much of her face she'd covered. Like she didn't want to be recognized, like she was hiding. I didn't think about it at the time. Only later, after everything happened, did I remember that detail. I've never told anyone that before. It's been 80 years. Everyone involved is dead now. But I still remember. I remember the jam on Annalisa's face. I remember Emmeline's laugh. I remember Polly's eyes when I opened the door that morning. And I remember walking past that house months later and seeing it stood empty. No one wanted to live there. No one wanted to sleep in the rooms where Emmeline and Annalisa had died. Eventually, someone bought it and tore it down, built something new on the land. But sometimes I dream about it. The old house, the fireplace in the parlor, Emmeline standing at the window, watching. And sometimes in those dreams, I see Polly across the street, watching back. Just watching, waiting. I was a desk clerk at the Travel Inn Motel on 42nd Street for 11 months in 1979. It wasn't a good job, but it was a job. Times Square back then wasn't like it is now, cleaned up, full of tourists and theaters. In 1979, it was rough, dangerous, the kind of place where you learned not to ask questions. The motel was 8 stories, maybe 200 rooms. We got all kinds, tourists who didn't know better and booked cheap, business travelers on tight budgets, and people who rented by the hour. Everyone who worked there understood what that meant. We didn't talk about it. We just checked people in, took their money, and minded our business. I worked the night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It was usually quiet. Most of the action happened earlier in the evening. By the time I came on, things were settling down. I'd sit behind the bulletproof glass at the front desk, reading paperbacks and drinking coffee, waiting for my shift to end. Saturday, December 1st, 1979, started like any other night. I came in at 11. The evening clerk, Tommy, gave me the rundown: who'd checked in, which rooms were occupied, which ones were scheduled for checkout in the morning. Nothing unusual. Around 11:30, a man came in. White guy, maybe 40, average height, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Clean cut. Nothing memorable about him. He paid cash for a room that wasn't unusual. A lot of our customers paid cash. He had 2 women with him, young, in their late teens or early 20s. One was wearing a red coat and heels that were too high for walking. The other had dark hair and was dressed more casually. They stood behind him while he checked in, not saying anything. One of them was chewing gum. I gave him a room on the 4th floor, room 417. He took the key, and the 3 of them went to the elevator. That was the last time I saw them go up. I didn't see them come down. My shift ended at 7 a.m. The morning clerk, Janet, came in to relieve me. I gave her the same rundown Tommy had given me: who was checked in, who needed to check out. Room 417 was paid through Sunday morning. I went home, slept through the day like I always did, came back at 11 p.m. Sunday night. Janet was still there, waiting to give me the handoff. She looked shaken. "What happened?" I asked. "4th floor," she said. "Room 417. There was a fire. I felt my stomach drop. "Anyone hurt?" She just looked at me. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "You need to talk to the police. They want to speak to whoever checked that room in." The police were still upstairs. I could see the lights flashing outside through the front windows. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. The whole front of the building was blocked off. A detective came down around midnight. His name was Detective Brennan, I think. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and tired eyes. He asked me about the man who checked into 417. I told him everything I remembered: average height, dark jacket, jeans, white guy, paid cash, had 2 women with him. "Can you describe the women?" he asked. I tried. One in a red coat, one with dark hair, young, but I hadn't paid much attention. I saw dozens of people every night. After a while, they all blurred together. "Did you see them leave?" he asked. "No, my shift ended at 7 a.m. They were still up there as far as I knew." He wrote that down. Then he asked, "Did the man seem nervous? Agitated? Anything unusual about his behavior?" I thought about it, tried to remember. No, he was normal, calm, just checking in like anyone else. The detective looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "The women didn't leave. They're still up there. What's left of them?" I didn't understand at first. Then I did, and I felt sick. He told me not to leave town, that they might need to talk to me again. Then he went back upstairs. I found out the details over the next few days. Everyone found out. It was all over the news. Room 417 had caught fire sometime early Sunday morning. The fire department responded around 9 a.m. When they put out the fire and went inside, they found 2 bodies on the beds. Both women had been decapitated. Their heads were missing. Their hands had been cut off too, removed from the scene. The bodies had been set on fire, probably to destroy evidence. There were signs of torture cuts all over their torsos, burn marks from cigarettes, evidence of beating. One of the women had been sexually assaulted. Both had been drugged with something, probably to keep them quiet while he did whatever he did to them. The medical examiner said they'd probably been killed Saturday night or early Sunday morning. The man had spent hours with them in that room, and then he cut off their heads and hands, set the beds on fire, and walked out. The police identified one of the victims within a few days. Her name was Dida Gudarzi. She was 22 years old, worked as an escort at a club in the East 60s. She lived in New Jersey with her family. Someone had reported her missing on December 1st, when she didn't come home. The other woman was never identified. No. They estimated she was 17 to 19 years old, but without her head or hands, they couldn't get fingerprints or dental records. They published descriptions in the newspapers, put out appeals for information. Nobody came forward. She's still Jane Doe. 45 years later, she's still Jane Doe. The police interviewed everyone who worked at the motel. They talked to me 3 more times, asking the same questions, hoping I'd remember something new. But I couldn't. The man had been completely unremarkable. That was the whole point, I think. He looked normal, acted normal. Nothing about him raised any flags. They showed me composite sketches based on my description and descriptions from other witnesses. None of them looked quite right. The man I'd checked in could have been anyone. The investigation went on for weeks. Police searched the room over and over, looking for evidence. They found traces of a sedative drug. They found cigarette butts. They found evidence that he'd used cleaning supplies from the housekeeping cart to try to clean up before setting the fire. But they didn't find him. The motel owner wanted to reopen room 417, but nobody would clean it. The housekeeping staff refused. Eventually, they had to hire a crime scene cleanup company. Even then, some of the housekeepers wouldn't go on the 4th floor at all. They said it felt wrong up there. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that man at the front desk. Average height, dark jacket, jeans. Calm. Normal. And behind him, those 2 young women, one in a red coat, one with dark hair. I'd checked them in. I'd taken his money and given him a key and sent them up to the 4th floor, and he'd murdered them. I knew it wasn't my fault. How could I have known? But I couldn't stop thinking, what if I'd paid more attention? What if I'd noticed something off about him? What if I'd called the police? Would those women still be alive? I quit the Travel Inn in January, told the owner I was moving out of state. That was a lie. I just couldn't work there anymore. Couldn't sit behind that desk knowing what had happened 4 floors above me. No, I got a job at a different hotel in Midtown, tried to forget about it. But every time someone checked in with women who looked too young or paid cash or seemed just a little off, I'd remember room 417. Years later, I heard they caught someone, a man named Richard Cottingham. He'd killed other women, similar methods, same kind of torture and mutilation. He was convicted in the early 80s and sent to prison, but by then it was too late for Dida Gudarzi, too late for Jane Doe. I'm 68 now. I haven't worked in a hotel in 30 years, but I still think about that night sometimes. December 1st, 1979, a Saturday night in Times Square. I think about the man walking in, calm and normal. I think about the 2 women standing behind him. I try to remember their faces, but I can't. I didn't look closely enough. They were just background, just 2 more people in the constant stream of people I saw every night. I wonder if they knew, if they had any idea what he was going to do, or if they thought it was just another job, another client, another few hours and then they'd go home. I wonder what happened in that room. What he said to them, what they said to him, how long it took, if they screamed, and if anyone heard them. I wonder if they tried to fight, if they tried to run. I wonder when they realized they weren't going to leave that room alive. The thing that haunts me most is the Jane Doe. The unidentified woman. She was someone's daughter, maybe someone's sister. Someone knew her, loved her, missed her when she didn't come home, but nobody ever claimed her. Maybe they didn't know she was dead. Maybe they thought she'd run away, or moved to another city, or just stopped calling. Maybe they were looking for her for years, checking hospitals and shelters and morgues. Or maybe nobody was looking at all. That's what I can't stop thinking about. That she died in that room and was buried without a name, and nobody came forward to say, "That's her. That's my daughter. That's my sister. That's my friend. She's been dead for 45 years. She's buried somewhere in a city cemetery under a marker that says Jane Doe and a case number. No name, no dates. Nothing to say who she was or that she mattered to anyone. The police still have her case file open. It's been open for 45 years. Every few years, someone looks at it again, hoping new technology or new information will help identify her. But so far, nothing. I looked up the case file number once. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would help somehow. Make it feel more real or less real, I don't know. Case number 79, M3428. Jane Doe. Estimated age 17 teen, Hispanic or Mediterranean descent. Approximately 5'4", 120 pounds. Dark hair. Found deceased, December 2nd, 1979. Travel in motel, room 417. That's all she is now. A case number and a physical description. I checked her into that room. I took the man's money and handed him the key and watched them walk to the elevator. And I never saw them again. I've thought about going to where she's buried, just to see if there's a grave, if there's a marker. To stand there and say something, though I don't know what I'd say. That, I'm sorry, that she deserved better, that someone should have noticed, should have cared, should have stopped what happened to her. But I haven't gone. I don't know if I ever will. Sometimes I dream about that night. In the dream, I'm behind the desk again, and the man walks in with the two women. But this time I stop him. This time I say something or do something or call the police. This time they don't go to room 417. This time they walk back out the door and disappear into Times Square, and whatever was supposed to happen doesn't happen. But then I wake up, and it's 2024, and Dita Goodarzi has been dead for 45 years. And Jane Doe has been dead for 45 years. And nothing I dream or think or wish can change that. The man who killed them is in prison. He'll die there. He'll never hurt anyone else. But Jane Doe is still buried without her name. She's still nobody. And I still remember checking them into room 417. I remember taking the man's money. I remember handing him the key. I remember watching them walk to the elevator. And I remember thinking absolutely nothing about it at all, because it was just another Saturday night in Times Square. Just another customer. Just another transaction. Nothing unusual. Nothing wrong. Nothing I needed to worry about. And that's what I can't forgive.